in 1987 was the year that changed my life. I came to London in 84. First couple of years were all about nannying, and then breaking free from that and going into counterculture, squatting, becoming an anarchist, turning vegetarian, going against Thatcher, going on class war marches and what have you, and so on. In 86 was a catalytical change when I met Rima Sands, Craig and Greg Sands' daughter and niece, via a young man called Jason, who I met at the tube station in King's Cross on my way to Camden, and he had a rat in a cage, and he was a very handsome psychobilly, looked great, and he smiled at me very coyly, and I smiled back, and we started talking, and then he invited me up to his place in Archway, and I'm talking about 1986 because these guys, Jason was going out with Rima, and Rima's family, I call them the ignoble royal family of organic and holistic macrobiotic food, because they created their own revolution in the 60s and 70s, as one knows. And Rima's dad, obviously, and her uncle, Gregory Sands, they did the first macrobiotic restaurant called Seed. And they had people like Mark Boland, John Lennon, Yoko, everyone went to it. Everybody went to this first in the world whole grain, organic, vegetarian, vegan, pretty much, place to eat. So they were way ahead of their time. And anyway, so I met Rima via Jason, because they were boyfriend and girlfriend, and I was a lover, but they had an open relationship. And I was living in Linden Gardens in Notting Hill Gate. And I had a party, and Jason rocked up with Rima and a couple of French guys, Sebastian and Olivia, and they looked so amazing. And I was always a style cat anyway. As soon as I got to London, I discovered Portobello and Camden Market and all the, there was so much vintage for like 2p. And I was very blessed that, I just had a flair for clothes, and I love clothes. And so Rima just turned up, and I fell in love with her instantly, and we became best friends. And then she introduced me to the Sands family, her family, in Portobello Road. And then that was my profound moment, because I was vegetarian, but I didn't know what organic was. And then I understood what organic was. And it was basically the use of farming without any pesticides, insecticides, chemicals, agro, industrial, everything and anything. And it was there it's God's country, and to protect nature and Mother Earth, and also to better one's human health. So I then started to go on a mission to always find organic food, and it was Rima and her family that created that from me meeting Jason in the tube down in King's Cross, just down the road. So that was a really nice thing. 87, however, was the year of the Harmonic Convergence, and I started to work with Rima's grandfather, Ken Sams, who had invented a UFO SAM, so a spinning Mylar kite that spins. I've actually got one in my cupboard. I should get it out. And it spins. And so I started working for UFO SAM, and Rima and I had moved into Cambridge Gardens together in Ladbroke Grove. But we were already having the time of our lives. I mean, Rima and I were such... we were so potent together. But we would walk down Portobello, and people like Mick Jones would come up to us and say, "Who the hell are you? You look amazing." And next minute we're in the Big Audio Dynamite video, and I didn't even know who Mick Jones was. I knew the Clash, but I didn't. I wasn't sort of au fait with fame and those sort of people. So we were already flying high, me and Rima, doing these things. And then in 87, I had an abduction. In Cambridge Gardens. My room, it was a basement flat, so my room was on the left-hand side, and you'd go in, and there was my bed on the floor near the window at the end, and quite basic 3-bedroom, and Rima in her room. And one evening I was lying on my bed, and I had a UFO SAM above my head. The window was closed, and the UFO SAM started spinning on its own axle, just literally going round. And I was looking at it and thinking, what the fuck is going on? Why is it spinning? The window's closed, the door's closed. There's no way that it could go round. And then the next minute, I was literally boomed to the back of the bed in like a gravitational pull. I couldn't move for love or money. And I was suddenly coming out of my body, and I was rising up with the UFO Sam up into the sky, and it was making all the noise that it would when you fly a UFO Sam, because we fly them on kites, so they'd go up far and cause satellite distractions, and literally people think they were UFO spaceships, and I was terrified. I kept saying, this can't be happening, this is ridiculous. So I knew I had a radio by my bed that I'd been listening to, and all I needed to do was click it forward. So I thought, I'm going to ground myself and click the radio on. So I literally pushed, my hand just managed to touch something, and I pushed it forward. And then this song came on, and it was Bob Dylan singing, "It's alright, you're travelling in space." I didn't even know any Bob Dylan songs, but there was this, it was definitely him and a guitar and a man. And I started smiling. I thought, God, this is great. And the next minute, boom, I was in a spacecraft, and I was going through deep space very fast. It was white. I looked around, it was clinically clean. I couldn't see anyone. It was just me and a great big Star Trek kind of, the screens and going. And by the way, I hadn't been on a plane at this point. I went on a plane a bit later on to Malta that very year. I went to the island of goddesses. What's it? Gomez? Gore? Yeah. That place. And Grimera. And then so this journey took me, and then I was getting out of the spacecraft and I was on the moon. And I was thinking, God, I've come all this way and I'm on the bloody moon. And it just looked like the Clangers moon. It was literally this big, that you see the NASA pictures and everything. And but there, just in front of me, was this crookedy wooden steps going up into this very crookedy, kind of like a witch's house, but it was very odd. And it had a stable door in. So I went up and I went in, and the bell rang, an old bell. And I looked in, and the room, this had a middle part, and you could go around it. It was stuffed and crushed full of books and ancient books and apparatus I never knew, and globes and telescopes, and just absolutely crammed of everything that you can imagine in the ancient worlds and in the modern world to come that was coming in. And I started walking around, and then I went all the way around just looking, literally. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I was just completely blown away by this experience, thinking, what the hell is this, And I was even thinking to myself, this must be an acid, those things that they call, when you have a flashback. But I hardly did acid. I'd only ever done like 1.5, and even then they were like bits. I was never a big drug taker. I liked to smoke dope, but that was it. And back in those days, we could smoke all, really good weed. And so it was, but then I went right the way around, and then something drew me into this massive book, and it was about this thick and this, and it was gold and dark and covered in dust. And I opened up the book, and it said, and this is absolutely a true story, the Book of Knowledge in filigree gold. It was almost like the words were coming out like, I suppose, Lord of the Rings, that way that you see it. And I put my hand on it. I remember doing that, and I smiled. I thought, wow. Closed the book, came out, and there were two greys, two comb people, two tools. And they were nice, and they were telepathic, and they had the eyes, and they were very big. And I said, what's your names? And they were called Vic and Eric. And I thought, great, Vic and Eric, nice. And they took me back to the ship when I came home. And then in the morning, I woke up and scratched my head and told everybody. And I carried on telling everybody in 1987, 88, 89. Everybody would listen to my abduction story, because more happened after that. And then, because I was always homeless anyway, through the first 20 years of my life in London, before I had my daughter. And here, homeless not in the streets, but homeless, like I didn't have a proper grounding place per se. So I was always on the go. I was always nomading and out there and having lots of lovers and boyfriends and such like, sex, drugs and rock and roll. And anyway, so I was with this girl called Nicola who had shaved head, and she was so pretty, and I can't remember where I met her, and I'd love to see her. But she told me in August that she was going down with her aunt and friend down to Glastonbury to the tour for this Harmonic Convergence, and I had no idea what that was. And she said, do you want to come? And I was kind of homeless as usual, staying at someone's place. And I went, yeah. So we went, got in the car, and her auntie was in her 60s, and her auntie's friend, who was a doctor, and her auntie's friend was a lawyer, and they were completely bonkers, eccentric women. So like this, and me and Nicola are in the back, and we're driving down to the Harmonic Convergence, and we get there, and we go up the tour. I think it was probably the first time I'd actually really had been to the tour as well in 87, because I'd gone to Glastonbury, the festival, in 86. Anyway, so we were up the top, and there was about 400 people. Now, they were professionals. They weren't your sort of average cranks. They weren't kind of like what you would imagine to sort of be into UFO technologies and harmonic convergence and nano systems and governance of these stars and it, because it was an alignment that had been waiting to happen for 6,000 years. So this was a huge ramping up and acceleration of humanity to go where we're going today and where we are now. So I got up there and we were up there and, you know, I was meeting people and it was amazing. And we stayed up the whole night, and at about 1 or 12 o'clock at midnight, there was fires up there. We were all sat down, and in the sky were thousands of spaceships. We all saw it, and nobody blinked an eye. Nobody was like, oh my God, look, the spaceships. It was like, there they were. They revealed themselves in like a cloaking thing, and they were all sat in the deep sky on that harmonic convergence, all looking at us. And it was crazy. And the other thing that was interesting about that weekend was that it was my birthday, and I was going to be 21 on the 17th of August. It was August the 16th and 17th. And so when people found out it was my birthday, I mean, I didn't have any cards or cake or anything like that. People were giving me hands-on healing and, you know, tarot and, oh my God, you're a chosen one. And I'm like, no, you know, don't be ridiculous, you know. But, you know, it felt great. It did. I felt, oh my God, this is so exciting. My birthday's come on a good day. You know, what a great, auspicious thing to have happen, and an event, and to see this after my own abduction and then seeing all the craft, and I knew that it was true. And it was like a validation for me, and it was a real like process. But obviously the world wasn't going to listen. Those that, you know, minds aren't the way that my mind had developed. So that's kind of how I had to go with it. Well, the harmonic convergence was the speeding up of 1987. The last time that the planets had aligned in this way was 6,000 years ago from 87. And it was a time almost where the dark was allowed in, more so than ever. And the dark did come in. And it was all about the choice of love and hate, love and evil, hate, you know. And God's creation and the angels around him, her, your God of understanding, allowed for all types to walk the earth. And so this was a period of immense importance in the 6,000 years, because it was also the killing and destruction of Gaia, Mother Earth. And we all know how that's played out if you love history or all the symbolism that we have in the world today. So 1987 was the time when all humans, all souls were going to be born. And it was a 25-year period to 2012. And it's called the nano period. And in the nano period, all technologies would be revealed, all technologies would come, and all mankind would have the opportunity to love thy neighbour, love thyself, know thyself, man, in the immense stuff that opened and went on to follow with Acid House and, you know, all the genres that we, you know, participated in. So it was basically liberty was being given and handed to humanity, and it was up to each individual from that point to awaken or not, or carry, you know, there's, you know, it doesn't matter if you're not awake, you will awake. Eventually you will realise that you are living in your own prison, your own mental slavery mind. So this was a time for the disclosure of the ageless wisdoms, the ancient wisdoms. And this goes back to, the first big wave of this opening was in the 19th century. Apart from botany and herbalism and homeopathy, there was also the great esoterical awakeners, the Rudolf Steiners, the Madame Blavatskys, Wasak in India was revealed, where all the ancient scribes and artifacts were taken from the plundering killing man, if you will. And so this has been kind of what this whole opening and awakening experience has designed to do, to promote a healthy human, a healthy individual, and not a human that is just tranced, enslaved and enchained. Because at the end of the day, the will of God is about your own will, and you have a choice. But if you are trapped into believing that money is all you need to have a great life, or whatever, and that you haven't got any consciousness about destroying the rainforest or polluting the oceans or creating plastics, then what have you, killing animals, factory farming them, wiping out insects and pollinators in the countryside. This is what this is all about. So we can see that in this harmonic convergence, in this great awakening, this first great alignment that came to us, is that one's own self-cultivation is all it takes. And that's it. It's not about me going, oh, I'm going to follow this fad, or I'm going to, which I've done, we've all been part of. But again, once I started following, I realised I wasn't following what was true to who I am. And so this is what it's all about. It's who am I? And know thyself. And then from that place, one can actually have high vibrations in oneself, because one has gone to the lowest vibrations of oneself, because one has totally reflected, had a look at all that trauma and triggers and grief and anger and frustration and whatever it is, disfigurement and how one feels. And then one can love that part, those sides, those shadow sides. And when one embraces that love in oneself, all the bad, the good and the ugly, one then has the ability to walk the earth tenderly, with love, with compassion, with empathy, and to be doing exactly what they're meant to be doing and who they are, rather than what they thought they should be doing, because the system has told us that we've got to whatever, do this, do that, be slaves and kill things. You know, when I started partying, it was the minute I arrived in London in 84, when I was 17 and a half, as a living nanny. Already there were things like the Kit Kat Club happening in London in 85 with Simon Hobart and all those types. There was a huge gay thing going on, where, you could go and it was dance music being played and people were literally mixing and cutting and putting together their own, mixes per se. So it was there, apart from things like, you spin me around, naturally you spin me, right? Things like that were always being played. So, but really it was in 1987, it was the Wooden Tops, and there was an album that came out called Balearic Beats, and the Wooden Tops were on it. And they had a track called Why, and I absolutely loved that album, and it was a golden little sparkly nugget, and I think it had been produced all around the first emergence of Ibiza and what was going on there. So that first hit me, and it was being played at Heaven. I mean, I used to go to things like Pigeon Toed, Orange Peel, and Bat Cave, and like I say, Kit Kat Club, Legal Warehouse parties, the Jam Factory down the road in King's Cross. I was in a squat on Wharfdale Road, and literally mutoid waste had overtaken the whole place, and it was my first time of actually going into something completely different, where you could swing across sort of weird lakes inside this factory, and bands like there was bands like Test Department and Flux of Pink Indians and Crass and Conflict and Dead Kennedys. So there was all that kind of like stuff coming through, but then there was also this emergence of beautiful music, this Mortal Coil, and just it was just all the Smiths, whatever you like. It was just a very fermenting time. So I started going to the raves, the smaller raves, and we could see that there was a community vibe building in my world. And I did my first ecstasy in 1987, and it was with Rima, and we ended up being with what's that film director, Alan? Anyway, we were some amazing people in Regent's Park in their place. We didn't want cigarettes, we didn't want alcohol, we just wanted sparkly water. It was a California sunshine. It was the last batch of the true kind of stuff that was coming through to open up our pineal glands and really allow us to communicate and be a part of something. And I think I did another one in that year, which was okay. And where did I go? Oh God, was it Raw? Anyway, so 87 was just glorious. It was amazing. It was the start of my life to where I went. And 88, 89 sort of just rolled effortlessly into the fact that there were people going around. They were ravers. I was part of the rave movement. I never went to the big ones. I know there were Sundance and Rain Dance and these huge ones. I was always found snubbling around with Orbital, and they were just starting out, and the Shaman and Mixmaster Morris and all these people, that we all know and love, and Rising High, Casper Pound's company. So I was always sort of like, I don't know if it was I called it the underground, and anyway, through my homelessness, I met extraordinary people. I mean, I went on to go into this holographic movement, and it was in late 87. And again, I was staying at someone's place in Hampstead. And my friend invited me to go to the Dartmouth Tunnel Club down in southeast London. And so I went, and Vic Reeves was stood up doing comedy, and I, and I really fancied a spliff. And I couldn't find the ladies, so I'd always go into the men's, kind of what I did anyway. And I went into the men's, and there was this guy rolling a joint on the back of the toilet in the cubicle, which was what I wanted to use. And I thought, great toilet and spliff. So I met him, and he was called Martin. And he said, where do you live, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm sort of staying at someone's place in Hampstead. And he said, oh yeah, you can come and stay at mine. It was, I've got a room, yeah, great. And he lived on Robin Hood Gardens in Canning Town. So I took down his landline, and next minute, so that night I ended up snogging Vic Reeves. I just wanted to put that out there because, he was young and tasty and handsome, and I had a kiss from him, and I was like, oh, great. Anyway, so off I go, and I wanted to get some weed. So Martin took me to his dealers in Bow. Priestman Point, right at the top, 24th floor. They're still there, the 3 blocks. And so I went up there, and I met a guy called Dave, and he was great. And I offered to make a cup of tea, and there was all these like stock brokers, and they're all spliffing up and getting dope, and all sort of from right Essex boys, real Essex fraternity. And so I went into Dave's kitchen because I offered to make a cup of tea, because that's how I managed to sort of stay everywhere. I'd always clean people's places and feed them and look after them, and invite everyone to everything together. And I went into the kitchen. Honestly, it was absolutely horrendous. I mean, you couldn't. So I cleaned the whole kitchen up. I literally, Dave went in and came up with the tea. And Dave went in and said, right, you're staying here, right? And I'll pay you to stay here. And I'm like, great. And so it was at his place that I met Janet Ives, who ran a company called Holotech PLC. And she came along, and she had all these holographic foils and what have you. And I looked at them and got on great. She was a scientist, an astrophysicist, and running her company. And we just hit it off. And I said to her, God, wouldn't it be amazing to make holographic clothing? And she was like, well, that's what we're trying to do, now. So basically, I ended up moving to Ilford and moving in with her family in Empress Gardens, and she had a studio in Seven Kings, and I was working there. But I was going out with a guy called Jonah Sharp, who's SpaceTime Continuum musician at the time, and Jonah's best friend Richard started sniffing me out. He was like, oh, what's going on with these holograms and stuff? So we were always doing I Ching, and I was learning, and I learnt about quantum molecular universe, because that's what holography is. So I was really being taught her astrophysics and quantum mechanics in 87, 88. And it was extraordinary. So that was a real learning curve for me, because I suddenly realised that the universe was a weeny universe as well as a massive expanding universe. And I started to understand what transmission holograms were. And we met Patrick Boyd, who's the best holographer in the world, in my opinion. And he had an exhibition of his work down at Some Bizarre Gallery in Soho. Soft Cells people, Steve, what's his face? You know, the guy that ran Some Bizarre. And we met Patrick, and we just looked at his holograms, these egg and bacon laid women, and amazing. If you've not seen them, Kate, my God, they are just mind-blowing. And so my vision was that was what we were going to do. We were going to create clothes that you could have like third, fourth, fifth dimensional things on it. You know, really, you know, that was where I was going. Anyway, so I worked for Janet in Holotech, and all the while Richard was kind of like sort of doing his own stuff on the side, which is SpaceTime. And then one day in March 89, early March 89, Richard said, why don't we start our own company up? And we were literally in the pub in Rockingham Place, Rankin House, down in Elephant and Castle, because we had friends there. And he brought out this shaman image of dancing shaman, and it was on glass. And he printed the foil onto it, filigree print, and I saw it. And I went, Richard, that's amazing. He said, yeah, now we've got to work a way of sticking it onto clothing and making it work. And immediately I said, great, okay, I'm with you. And I said, and I know what the company's going to be called. And he said, what? And I said, SpaceTime. And he went, yeah, because that was what a hologram was, space and time, space and light, like space, basically space together. And so then I sort of had to sort of shuffle away from Holotech, which I did. And you know, we took a few numbers like applied holographics and light impressions, and you know, the kind of like the key foil suppliers. And we got a studio in Cable Street in East London, early 89. We were already kind of in there in 88 because Heidi, another friend of ours, was in there, and we would go in and use for, I don't know why, but we were going in. And SpaceTime really began. And then the first thing that we did, obviously, I don't know if you're going to put this on, was these hard holographic filigree. I mean, this is what, 1989. So how long is this? How old is this now? No, it's longer. 89, 99, 2009. 30 years. It's 29 years old. This is 30 years old. And these are dancing shaman, and they're about 3,000 years old, and they come from Mexico, and they're symbolism of humanity, and very much representing what humans do best, which is gather tribes and communities and work from a high place. So death being a very strong thing, because death is life. In 1989, we came up with this process of hard holographic foil, sealing sort of a plasticky rubber thing underneath, and placing our imagery. And this is all down to Richard, really. Richard was the one that went to art school in Newcastle, and you know, he had all the kind of like concept. In 1989, SpaceTime invented my company that I just set up with Richard, the first holographic processing of this. And we decided, well, Richard decided that we would use symbolic public art, which means you can use it and you're not going to get sued. And I think the thing about SpaceTime was, apart from it being my baby, it was our baby. It was it had come from the things that I had said to you before. There was a definite correlation with harmonic convergence, the acceleration processes, going to space, meeting people on the dark side of the moon, whatever you want to call it, coming back, and then going on that strategic journey, all through homelessness, all through toilets, all through clubs, all through completely just talking to anybody and everybody, and then landing in the right place, in the right space-time type thing. So that was one of our first, the Dancing Shaman, and we did another one, a different kind of version of that. And then this one is the Melusina goddess, and this is the bee goddess, and these are all the bees. But actually, this is a butterfly. We did a bee one as well, which was a blue goddess, and so she is all about butterflies and energy and elementals and pollination and good soil and knowing soil and knowing the magic that comes out of, for example, a butterfly flaps its wings in China and will cause a hurricane in India type thing, things like that. So there's a lot of behind esoterical, cult, educational practices that anyone can find if one seeks and one learns and one wants to know about how ancient civilizations and cultures have all impacted on us and still do. So anyway, so we did that, and that was 89, and we started getting quite a lot of press. In fact, we got loads, and television and various things started to come through because of this. You know, we were like, you know, originators and pioneers, I suppose, more to the point, and then we started to do little soirees at our place. I mean, we would, you know, because we get people to come in and see our clothes because we developed that process that I just showed you. And then, sort of about a month later, we developed this process, which was this beautiful, just soft and silky and gorgeous. And that was kind of like where we really sort of went into merchandise and much better and bigger things. However, we also invented fabric, and unfortunately I have nothing of the fabric here to show you, which is a real shame, because those ladies' biker jackets and those jeans and skirts and all the things we did, because we also did, you know, a ski wear collection, but it was in organza with the filigree printing and ski wear and fleeces and microfibers, and we did heat sensitive stuff as well. So I think we were really like very progressive and very ahead of our time almost. But those that found SpaceTime, loved it, and we sold to, you know, I went on a massive tour up and down the country selling to MASH and Geese and Issy Nissan in Glasgow and you know, World, and, you know, all the shops that were kind of trendy and independent and individual, and then so we started having these soirees, and they started to sort of get bigger and bigger, and then sort of between 1989 and 92, we just were suddenly, I just knew we were doing ambient techno parties, and we had Morris come and play all the time, and they were word of mouth, there were no flyers, they were free to get in. I never had beer, because I don't like beer today, and I wasn't going to have beer in, you know, cans and all that, and banned Coca-Cola, banned all these kind of mass business things, because I was already into recycling. I mean, our studio in Cable Street was completely upcycled, everything we found, all the holographic foils, they were up on the walls and on the furniture, and, you know, so the place was like just like a wood and spacey metal place. And so the parties just, and I chose dates, and that was very important, that I chose dates that kind of corresponded a bit like the Harmonic Convergence as to what their properties were, what potency was going to come into the event, what intentions. I didn't know I was doing intentions at the time, but now I do. And we had everybody. We had so many people. We had you came as Polly, and you came to pretty much most of them, and I think you brought Space Granny. Somebody brought Space Granny. Rosie, darling Rosie. And we had, I mean, there were like famous people wandering around, like Kevin Rowland and Phil, and what's his name from EastEnders, and Ricky, and, you know, yeah, all that. And KLF came to, Jimmy Corti came to every party, Orbital, you know, it was crazy. It was a really interesting hodgepodge of lovely, beautiful, wonderful, kind people, and we played ambient techno. That was the theme. It wasn't about hardcore rave, you know, I was trying to encourage people not to take drugs. I know it sounds crazy, because I think everybody was on drugs bar me. I never did any drugs at my party, ecstasies, acids, anything like that. Coke, hate Coke, still do. And, you know, so I kind of kept, you know, I'd have all my friends hostess in with me, Iona, Rima would come along with Love Bomb and Gusto when she was doing Love Bomb and Gusto, Fifi, Annalisa, Heidi, Priya. There was just a lovely hodgepodge of us girls, and I gave everyone some holographic to wear for everyone, and then we had these kind of like mirror badges and lenticular badges as well, so they had them on as well, and you know, and basically they followed by lead. So me as a hostess, I would, anybody that came in I didn't know, I'd always go up and go, hi, how are you, and who are you, and introduce myself to whoever was around me, and I kind of made people feel at home. That was kind of the point. The point was you were coming to our place of learning and our place of creating, and it was very high vibe. You know, there was always magic, always something opening up. You know, we would suddenly get a phone call from New York, and it would be, you know, the New York Times, or it would be Bloomingdale's, or it would be a big fashion house wanting our products in LA, whatever. It was a bonkers mission control place that when the ambient parties happened. And then the other thing was we also dressed them up. We always themed them. So we, like on January the 11th, I think, which was the best party, and I'm sure you were there, Kate, that was another alignment, 1992. And Richard had gone out in the van, and he'd come back with like 20 Christmas trees that had not been sold. And so he put them out into the other, because it was a big studio, so we put them out into the reception bit that you come in and hung them on chains. So we had a swinging Christmas tree forest, and it smelled beautiful. And we put AstroTurf little mountain seating underneath it, but you could push the trees and they'd sort of sway back to you. And, you know, so we always had this kind of a huge dress up, and made it really important that people really realised that this was just something multidimensional and holographic and SpaceTime. Very much a SpaceTime event. And then about 4 a.m, I would go around cleaning. So I'd be picking up all the cans of drinks people brought and bottles, and have my cloth in my hand, and on my hands and knees. And by 6 o'clock, the place was immaculate. The toilets downstairs. And all these new guests were coming from other parties they'd heard about the SpaceTime party. And they'd all turn up, and the place was just like shining, immaculate and beautiful. And you'd have like ambient seated sections. So we would do the punky area. But of course, punks never went to the punky area. They went to the posh section and the chaise longue areas and all the cushions areas. And it was all the posh people that went to the punk area. So there was this kind of, like, we were doing these little places and situs, and we had the roof as well. People going up onto the roof. And, you know, it was a great place just to meet anybody and everybody, and listen to, you know, emerging talent of the day, Aphex Twin and Orbital and Plaid and A Black Dog and Detroit techno and British techno, German techno, Dutch techno, whatever. And there was a lot of good stuff, as you know. So having that was easy. That was the easy part. The music part was pretty easy. Future Sound of London, that was it. I used to always insist that Mental Cube be played Human Stacanoid before they became Future Sound of London. And yeah, I had the time of my life. Between 87 and 92, before Castle Morton and the end of free partying, in that 5 years, it didn't really matter where you went, to be honest with you. There was... Well, actually, I say that. I didn't really like going to DIY or Bedlam. And it's not because I don't like them. It was just they all played Gabba and really just shockingly horrible music, I thought. Repetitive, boom, 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 boom. You know, and there was just people jumping around, and they looked like they were on, I don't know, God knows what they were on. I was always interested in intelligent techno, musical, melodious techno. So that was kind of where I governed myself around. So I think the thing about it was that it didn't matter who you were, so long as you were there and you showed up. And it didn't matter how, you know, because you'd get to events in the woods, the forests, down in Devon, down in Kent, down in up around the Orbital. And once getting there, the Spiral Tribe, you know, they were always good fun. Because they'd always have a fire. And I thought, well, okay, I'll go to Spiral Tribe because they've got a fire. At least you can have the fire and get away from that Gabba and that bloody, whatever, repetitive. And I think it's really sad to say, but I'm really hoping it's going to come back. And I don't know how we're going to do this, Kate, because I know it's down to us now to create that space where one can be totally free and meet anyone and everyone and be inspired and be motivated and to feel extremely powerful as to who you are, and not dumbed down, not pushed into celebrity boxes and fake tits and mouths and God knows what people are doing and eating terrible foods and doing terrible things to themselves under the name of the government, the system. So we do need to create, and I think it's happening. I think, the way that things are going with the internet of all things, I think things have really, sped up, but they have to. So back then we were becoming conscious, really conscious partiers, conscious in how we recycled after our parties. We had no security teams, we had no police, we had no fucking health and safety, fuck off. We had none of that bullshit. We didn't need to have people telling us how to be. And that was what the essence of that time was all about. It was where you were allowed to be and find out who am I and do and apply, so long as you had your tribe around you. And having the tribes meet was amazing, because you could always have a laugh and take the piss and be sarcastic. Oh God, Steve, your music is shit at your party. And he'd go, your music makes me fall asleep. Be like, okay, fine, but it was happening. And it was very much a happening thing, pretty much probably what the 1960s kind of counterculture scenes were about, and the 1970s and even punk rock and new romantic and all that sort of stuff, top of the pops. We did it, our own top of the pops. We did the top of the pops in the fields, in the warehouses, in our studios, in anywhere that we could squat, anywhere that we could reclaim the streets later on, anything to create the template for cognitive, high accelerated learning, being able to be extremely love and kindness at the seat of the campaigning. That was kind of what it was all about. And I think the ecstasy fueled generation, for example, nobody went to pubs. The brewery industry was on its knees, and it was the brewery industry that created the class war against dance culture, music. It wanted everyone back in the pubs, being really drunk the whole time and fighting on the terraces. Fighting went down. Millwall and West Ham became friends. They were all on E watching their freaking football matches. It was amazing. I'm not saying I condone and that's what I think it should happen. We should all be on ecstasy, because I don't. Because I believe it's food. I believe it's organic. I believe the revolution is local, and I believe it's seasonal. And I think that's kind of what it's all about. And if you want to have highness inside of yourself, you self-develop yourself. You don't take a pill and hope it's all going to be miraculously great. It's not, because you're going to wake up and have a come down. And so I just think I feel that period in life was, I'm just so grateful that I was there. I can't explain it. When we look, look at the amazing things that keep happening to us now. You and I can pinpoint where we were back then, and then go, oh yeah, and, do you know what's that? There's a party down the road because blah blah blah, and I ran into, Jimmy Corti or Martin Glover or Youth, and blah 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 blah, and on it goes, and then and they're doing plays up in Liverpool. KLF things are going on still, and they know. And the thing is, we know that the powers that be, the duplicitous of divide and conquer lower energy types, the deep state, the shadow government, call them what you will, are they're in complete chaos, because we're awake to them. We know they're there. I mean, personally speaking, we want them to come on board to the love side of life, and stop sucking on babies' bloods and being pedo ritual and what have you, and satanic and crazy. I mean, at the end of the day, Satan was a fallen angel, call it what you will. And Lucifer, I think there's about 3 of them, aren't there? Anyway, you know what I mean? So that's what I mean. I think, we are now in the eye of the storm today. But the intention of humanity is your righteous thinking. How do you feel about who you are? And when you have a right thought and you transmit it out into the universe in your electro frequencies, you can bet your bottom dollar that there will be somebody else in synchronicistical governance of their own self that goes into that thought. And when that thought gathers strength, and then it starts to embody in the body, because you're clean, because you're alive, because you're aware, then the movement is happening. Well, Castle Morton, in 1992, we all went, everybody, we all sort of ascended upon it, was amazing. It was a Leave No Trace affiliation, so people cleaned up after them, contrary to what the mainstream medias will say. The music was okay, it wasn't great, but it didn't matter. You had the great Malvern Lake to jump in. You had the most spectacular countryside to wander around, and it was hot, if I remember. And there was all loads of gangs were there. Oh, hi, oh, you got here then, travelling all night. I met some of the people who lived in Castle Morton, old lovely ladies, and I sat and had a cup of tea, and I was picking up waste around their house, and they go, oh, don't worry, and they were lovely. And I told them all about Thatcherism, and I talked to them all about what counterculture raveism was about. And they said afterwards, you should run for the country, because what you say makes sense, because it came from compassion and love. And I don't say that like with an ego head, because a lot of people have said it to me in the past. But I've kind of dipped away from politics, particularly because I like Trump. I'm off it. I'm just not going anywhere with the hate attacks coming. So 1992 Castle Morton demonstrated that people could come together, they could be on the common land. You've got to remember the common lands were huge and prevalent up to about the 18th, 19th century, when they were all enclosed. When the Enclosure Acts came in, man became a slave, a real slave, because he had no choice but to go into the city and work in the factories and be a part of a big slave, big industrial driving system. He lost his art and rights to his cottage industries, to his nomadic foraging, to his feeding his animals and his families, and being in that world. That changed. Castle Morton felt like that. It felt like we had all come out of the cities from wherever, Birmingham, London, Bristol, Swindon, Lechlade, and got there. And we felt powerful. And when it finally closed after, I don't know, was it 10 days, when they finally got the last travellers off, and then there was a huge drive to bring in the changing of the laws towards partying and common land settlements. 8 or more people gathering around a repetitive sound could be arrested. Things did change. I mean, I went off and worked in Paris for John Galliano, and then went off to San Francisco for 2 years. So I kind of didn't really know between 92 and 94 how things had changed. But when I got back in 94, end of 94, that was the beginning of my journey into who I am properly. That's when I could really start to breathe and not have to be honest with you, I was done with partying. I mean, I still party, but I was done. We were young. We were, 20 to 25 I was, when I was going through that whole Harmonic Convergence to Castle Morton. And there was some real, there was some weird people on that vibe, that scene as well. There was a lot of people doing a lot of drugs. I mean, a lot of people are dead today because of that. I was at a funeral the other day because of the drug thing. Personally, legalise all drugs. I've always said it. Take the stigmas out, get rid of the government. This is what's got to happen. We've got to get rid of the state. The state is out of date. The system is destroying Mother Earth. And we're being run and ruled by psychopaths who don't give a shit. That is where we need to make amends now, individually. I need to get on with my musical. I need to get on with the story Children of the Soil, and I need to do it that way and stop focusing on the deep state. I know what the deep state is. And become powerful for who I am. And it terrifies me. Because it means I'm going to have to say this all over again and again and again about sovereignty, individual sovereignty, not birth certificates and selling your rights to, giving your rights away when you're a baby, signing a piece of paper in the Admiralty law. And I just hope people are awake to that, and I hope people are waking up, because there's going to be a lot of fucking pissed off people when the shops run out of food and there's no water in the ground. And this is the reality. And we have a choice now. We are literally at the pinnacle of standing up for Mother Earth, keeping the trees in the ground, keeping the roots in the ground, coming away from monocropped industrialised farming practices, and allowing the pollinators and the insects and the humans that love Earth teach those that don't know how to love Earth, do the loving of Earth. And I think that's what we were always about. We weren't just there being selfish. You went on to do total raw food and the whole raw food. Eventually you were the first person out there doing that. And there's probably people in front of you that were like that, but you became the symbol of that, of which is. And it serves you well, because you are serving your community and you know your shit. So I know my shit. I have come away from fame. I have not wanted to really have the fame. I've had about 5 opportunities to be famous, and every single time I walked away. And I crashed and burned it. I didn't want to be that person, because I needed to find out who I was and what my journey on the earth this time is around. And it just happened that I was born in a great year when England won the World Cup, the only year they won the World Cup. And that there are 144,000 people who are coming up to the 10% mark now of the 100th monkey. It's happening, it's here, and consciousness is very quick. Once you realise and you wake up and you have your epiphany, that's it. So I think what we need to do is create a lounge where people can come and they can mix and they can meet and they can be a part of not a faceless technology, smartphone. Fuck the apps. Fuck them all. Fuck. Oh, 5G. Get it out. We cannot have it. That's really going to mind control us. So we need to really ground ourselves and remember who we are. And that was what we were then. We were finding out who we were. We were young, we were crazy, and we'd go, we had no mobile phones. We were telepathic. And the more that we're plugged into the matrix of technologies, the less we remember how to remember who we are. And that's kind of why, this is an honour to be doing this interview for you. This is really something that's really, I didn't even know what I was going to be doing. I just thought, quick shower, grab something and make it happen. Okay, dance music, rave culture put me on that trajectory because we weren't staring at the front of a room looking at one person talking. We weren't looking at the DJ. We were looking at each other. We had an opportunity to know and meet anybody from everywhere, from up north, from down south, from black to white to pink to green to old to young. It didn't matter. It was intergenerational. And that was a great foothold in. That was a great place that the acid house generators gave to the principles of who I am today, because I talk to everybody, I talk to anybody, and unless of course they're completely weird and they're sucking on my blood and vampire in me, but then I just put my protection on. So, and have my shield and my sword, and that's what that period did. It allowed you we weren't worshipping authority. We weren't worshipping the big DJs that came along afterwards. In fact, we all laugh at those big DJs. I'm not naming names because that's just rude. But they know who they are. You know who they are. You don't cook for them. Or uncook for them. So, people are entitled to do whatever they want, so long as it's love and kindness at the seat of their campaign, so long as it doesn't harm the earth, so long as it doesn't leave a load of rubbish and mess that's not going to be able to recycle or break down for thousands of years. And I think that's where our consciousness lay. We were in very much in a huge awakening of convergence, and we need to bring it back. And I'm not sure how. I don't think it's going to be the acid house rave. And my daughter goes to raves, and they're really weird. And they're run by the police and security men, and the drug dealers are all in there. And they don't announce anything until on the mobile phone settings at a certain time. And then suddenly you've got a whole load of 15, 16, 17-year-olds all going to Hanolt or Ealing or wherever. And they do it differently. But they're our children, and they know who we are. So we can only continue to, grow and allow them to grow into that of what they're going to become. No judgment, but we do need to fucking save the planet. When I say save the planet, I'm not talking save the planet. We'll be here long before we've gone, or after we've gone. But we need to keep the forests. And that came up out of that whole period, the Harmonic Convergence through to Castle Morton. It was all about nature and the environment. And that was really what it was about. We got out into nature and we got into environments, and we weren't sat behind screens, and we weren't sat in our castles, and we weren't hiding ourselves on social media. We were actually talking physically, speaking emotionally, passionately, talking crap probably, but we were together. And that was a unity that held no class or creed or faith. The kind of community was about dancing, listening to good music, getting off your face if you wanted to, or not. Because I never found I needed to take drugs in that period, because the music was enough. It was great. It was amazing. Oh my God! And of course, and you'd bounce around all night long. Oh, I think I might go home. 3 o'clock. Oh, I might go home. 4 o'clock. My other spliff, another spliff. Suddenly, the lights would come through in our studio. We had, you saw, we had those skylights all the way across the top of our studio. And then suddenly, boom, and you'd see all the fog. Remember on January the 11th? It was like we were in a spaceship. The whole of the party was in a spaceship because there was so much fog by the River Thames outside the window up on the top floor. And then when the fog started moving away and the sun started breaking through, 6:30, it was amazing. It was amazing. Energetically, we all graciously just... I think that's God. God is the sun. The sun is God. And is conscious. And it was beautiful. It was a lovely time. We would be relaxed. We would be all chilled. We'd all be in the arms of our lovers or not, or our new friends or not. Sunrise, sunset, dusk to dawn. That was, up the whole night, and conscious partying. That was that period, that 5 year, from 87 to 92.